All right, perfect timing. Welcome everybody. My name is Sean Odell, and I'm excited to have you all on today. We have a good amount of actually a really good amount of folks that have joined on the webinar today, and I did look at the attendee names, and I do see some friendly names of mine out there, folks I've worked with in my past, and just want to welcome everybody to today's conversation. We're going to go probably 45, 50 minutes or so. And really look forward to the interaction. And as always, when it's a webinar, folks start to join right as you begin. And so thank you to some of you folks that have just joined, increasing the attendance. It's always excited to see folks focused on Kubernetes and excited about ultimately, obviously, what we're doing at Portainer, but really looking forward to it today. So here's a quick highlight of the agenda, and I hope you appreciate the kind of inception that you have of my video inside of the slides. Is something that worked last week really, really well. But what we're going to do today, just quick intro of myself and Adolfo, and we'll do a little dialogue, have a little conversation there. Then I will take no more than 5 to 10 minutes. Really just talking about why folks, why all of you hopefully have begun your adoption and container journey. And then we'll focus on some of the challenges. Now, today's webinar called Making the Hard Easy, and we're focusing on Kubernetes adoption. Look, there is far more to Kubernetes adoption than just Kubernetes itself, right? There's applications, there's people in process, there's tooling, there's so many things that go into it. And one of the things that we've been hearing from our customers and from our community is, hey, look, Portainer just makes it a little bit easier. And so this is where it actually, where this idea came about. So while we're going to be focusing or utilizing Portainer, excuse me, Adolfo, it will be in the demonstration and the deep dive. But it's really meant to highlight how you can join and how you can join up in this journey of containers and Kubernetes-based orchestration and get going a whole lot faster than maybe you have today. And then we'll close out with some next steps. And as I introduce Adolfo real quick, I do want to make a quick statement. There is chat. Feel free to ask questions. I will manage the chat. Adolfo will jump in there as well. What we want to do is actually be as interactive as possible. We're not going to take anybody off of mute or allow anybody to come off of mute. But what we'll do is in the chat or in the Q&A, excuse me, we will answer questions, and we may answer some questions live. Adolfo was a champ last week when we did this, just to give him a quick shout out. And he actually did a few things live that he was not prepared for based upon questions. This is not a, we're not here to try and do everything live, but if we can, we'll do it. And if we can show it, we'll show it. If not, we'll answer it in the Q&A, or we'll send you to the community. So as I mentioned, I am Sean Odell. I am no stranger to webinars. I lead our developer relations and marketing organization at Portainer, and nobody really cares about me because I'm not the one doing the demo today. But I want to introduce Adolfo. Welcome, brother. How you been today? And give us a little bit of introduction about yourself.
Okay, Sean, thank you very much. Thank you for that initial introduction of the agenda. Thank you, everyone that's joined. I'm the sales engineering manager for Portainer. I'm an Uber geek. Everybody's a geek in Portainer. Sean is a geek himself. He just didn't really go deep into that, but he's a huge geek and knows Kubernetes inside out. I don't know, last time Sean was wearing his Kubernetes t-shirt, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wear my Kubernetes t-shirt today. So as you can see, I got my Kubernetes stuff here, right here. Right, there you go. So I'm ready to do the demo, answer some questions. Hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, we're here for that. Thank you.
That's awesome. And I just had somebody point out to me that the Q&A may not be working. So I'm going to work on that. So if somebody would, please post a quick question in the Q&A if you don't mind. And then we'll see if we can jump in there as well. And just to be clear, I'm wearing my Portainer. Oh, thanks, Bruce. You win. I'm wearing my Portainer t-shirt today. I had on my Kubernetes shirt last week. So thank you, Brandon. And looks like we are working. I appreciate it. Richie, we need Portainer t-shirts. We could, you're talking, well, I'm the right person, and Adolfo could probably make that happen. But thank you for the idea, and we'll get it going. So real quick, thank you. That was a quick sidebar. Got a little sidetracked with just making sure Q&A was working. So Adolfo, right? We're techies. We're all techies. That's what we do at Portainer. why Kubernetes or why containers for you? And I asked that question. There's a lot of different ways to take it, but take 30 seconds. Why containers? Why Kubernetes? And what excites you about the really the cloud native technologies of today?
Well, containers, for me, it's a natural progression of a modern infrastructure, especially today where everything is cloud-based, right? But cloud is not just running something on a provider that says that has a cloud. It's basically the philosophy behind using cloud technologies. For me, it's just natural. Leaving the monolith or the having to do tons of configurations to something that's prepackaged, tested, working. Why not? And if you don't have that, you can make it and build your own containers. So that's, for me, amazing. And Kubernetes, I like to refer to our CEO's blog that's called Crawl, Walk, and Run, right? And if you start with containers, it's natural to start with Docker and then slowly progress into something like a cluster-like technology, Docker Swarm. And eventually, when you see that you really need that massive adoption of containers in your infrastructure, Kubernetes, it's just there, right? They're all great technologies, they're all amazing, but Kubernetes got that extra oomph that gives you, a lot more flexibility. And it's obviously, more geared towards the enterprise, let's say, infrastructure and environment. So yeah, there you go. Hope that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. And it sets the stage. So as Adolfo said, I have been in and around containers and Kubernetes for what feels like a really long time these days. And I can remember my first taste in Kubernetes, and I'll be honest with you, I was overwhelmed. And I happened to have networking skills. I obviously had infrastructure skills. I had what I felt like was all of the necessary skills to make it work and make it happen. And I struggled originally. It was just a learning curve, right? But all of us, every one of us, no matter what stage we're at in our journey, we are consuming or utilizing containers for a reason, right? I love this this picture, this eat, sleep, code, and repeat. I have another version where it says eat, sleep, code, respect, because that's what we are all about, is delivering software. And one of the reasons we made this transition is just to improve the overall software delivery. No offense to monoliths. I love monoliths. I appreciate monoliths. And if you need to run monoliths, and you probably will, not everything can be containerized. It's okay. But what we have with containerized applications is really just improving upon that software delivery method. And hopefully you all, whether, depending on where you're at in your journey, have experienced that. If not, hopefully you can learn a few things today that will help you accelerate your journey. At the end of the day, it really is about containers, not necessarily the orchestration layer or the way to run them. Simon, I see your question. I'm actually going to have Adolfo answer that question here in just a little bit. We'll do it live because I think it's a fantastic question. So hold it and we'll get to it. There is a diversity in deployment locations. Adolfo mentioned it, public clouds, right? The question Simon brought up is, what's the difference between Docker and Kubernetes, right? And so there's just a variety of ways to deploy it on premises in AWS and Azure. And so there's just so many ways to consume it. I think AWS has like 90 different ways to consume a container. I know that's slightly being dramatic. It's not 90, but it is a lot, right? And so there's just diversity. What it comes back to is the idea of delivery or developer self-service. And so containers have really just been a way not only for developers, but for even infrastructure folks or traditional sysadmins or IT admins to be able to consume applications in a very different way, in a simpler way. And with that, we have seen organizations struggle. All of you have probably had third-party vendors say, hey, we're switching from a package installation that goes on an operating system to either SaaS or to a containerized model of delivery, right? And so those third-party requirements have made you shift. And so there's a lot of different reasons, and we're okay with that. And what we want to do is help you in that. The thing that comes along with it, I mentioned a few of these challenges. My personal one was the knowledge and skill gap. Right, very beginning, I thought I knew it. I thought I was going to be able to just jump right in. Nope, didn't happen. I had to learn. I had to overcome some of my skill gap. And some of you may be in that place today, and that is absolutely okay. We completely understand it. I still have to go back and check my commands from a kubectl perspective on a regular basis. It's just the way it is. And some folks may be doing it with Docker. And there's just a lot of different things that you have to learn. And yes, sometimes we have to go back and Google it, and that's fine. It's just the way it works. One of the things that we've seen around adoption or struggle is the landscape, right? Whether it's observability, whether it's service mesh, whether it is what version of Kubernetes do I even use Kubernetes? Do I use something like Swarm? Do I, what sort of role-based access or what sort of permissions do I give folks, right? There's just so many things to choose from. And because of that, it just feels like it's overly complex at times. And so what we want to, help folks understand, all of you understand, is it doesn't have to be overly complex. And we, while not simplifying it to a point where you don't get the value or the benefit of containers. And so hopefully you'll see a little bit of that today from what Adolfo shows in Kubernetes. I mentioned it already, triage and troubleshooting. I felt like it was so difficult to jump into logs. I still have to go, okay, where is this log coming from? How do I get the information, right? Am I getting the necessary information? And there was just a lot of things that obviously come back to knowledge and skill gap, but having to remember when you're in the middle of a troubleshooting scenario. And so triaging and getting it done. Simon, you asked the perfect question. I have a challenges with container adoption, or under this section, I have Docker versus Kubernetes. Now I want to be clear. It is not necessarily a Docker versus Kubernetes. It really is a Docker and Kubernetes, or Kubernetes and Docker. And so to help out the audience, Simon asked the following question. How would you explain, I'm going to ask Adolfo this and I'll let him answer this, is how would you explain in simple terms the difference between the two technologies?
Okay, that's a great question. I would say that Docker is primarily concerning creating and managing individual containers, while Kubernetes is focused on orchestrating and managing containerized applications at scale, right? With capabilities like horizontal scaling, orchestration of multiple containers, and self-healing, something that you do not have with Docker. So I'd say that's the main difference. To make it simple. Right? I hope that answers your question.
No, thanks for doing that, Adolfo. And honestly, the reason I love that answer, and not only the question but the answer, is you don't necessarily have to use Kubernetes for every single scenario. It really just depends, right? And so keep things simple. And it goes back to my comment earlier. If you need to run a monolith, right? My approach, the approach at Portainer, is run the application where it works best. And so if it needs to be in a monolith, if it needs to be a container, if it needs to be in Kubernetes, if it's a different scenario and you need to run it on Docker, go for it. But at the end of the day, let's get that application up and running. And that's what we're all about. And so now let's transition a little bit, and I'll just give a kind of a quick highlight of what Adolfo is going to show. And one thing I want to point out, this is really for your education. While Adolfo will be utilizing Portainer to help deploy applications, manage applications, right? Obviously talk about security and compliance. Just because we're using Portainer does not mean the same concepts apply, but we want to highlight clearly how we believe we make it easier, or making the hard easy. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adolfo, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Adolfo, you can share yours, and I'm going to man the Q&A. So if I find something that that needs to be answered live, I'll jump in, and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start sharing my screen. I think you have to stop sharing yours.
Yep, there it is.
Okay, cool, thank you. All righty, here we go. Okay, I hope everybody can already see my screen. I have here a Portainer environment, a Portainer server or instance, if you may, managing 3 different Kubernetes clusters. As you can see, I sort of gave them the location in the name of the Kubernetes cluster. One is running in Helsinki. It's a bare metal Kubernetes cluster. The other one's running in London with Civil. And the third one is running in Toronto. And I live in Costa Rica. So, I mean, you can see how distributed this is, right? So for Portainer, the first thing I like to always mention is that it's so agnostic that geography is not really a problem with container. It doesn't really matter where you're hosting your infrastructure. For us, it's just more important than anything else to be able to manage your environment properly. So I prepared here, as you can see to the right-hand side of my screen, a deployment of a Ubuntu MySQL image, right? It's MySQL, well, Ubuntu, if you don't know, Canonical has a set of images that they curate, and MySQL is one of them. I like it because it's quite stable and very interesting. It's got TLS on top of that. So this is a typical deployment of a MySQL container, right? It's 60 lines of code. So if we take off the separators, yeah, 60 lines of code, roughly. Let me deploy the same MySQL database on a Kubernetes cluster. So I'm going to start with this, the one in London, right? As best practice, I'm going to create a namespace. Just call it webinar 00. Okay. That's the interface for a namespace. And now I'm going to deploy the application. So step number 1, namespace. Step number 2, application with a form. So I access application with a form. This is the namespace I've just created. I'm going to call it DB00. I'm going to use, as I mentioned, the same Ubuntu MySQL container image. I know I have to set up an environment variable, so otherwise it's not going to work. So mandatory to deploy this the MySQL database. I'm going to call it webinar 123. So this is the password for this MySQL root password. Persistence, yes. Let's give it some persistence. Live MySQL, 10 gigabytes is more than enough. And as I progress and add things to this form, you'll see that it changes. So let me delete this so you can see what happens. So when I added persistence, the deployment options changed because Portainer is opinionated in the sense that it helps you go through the path of deploying an application in the best way possible, right? So again, I'm just going to repeat this. You see, when I clicked on persistence, this changed from isolated to shared and shared options. So lib MySQL and gigs. Here I can, add reservation limits if I need, how many instant counts I want, if I need out of scaling, how much I'm gonna. This is not enabled yet, but I could have enabled this with simple metric server or Prometheus plugin into my Kubernetes cluster. Placement rules, if I want to make sure it's running on a very specific node, I say I want to run it on second node. And how am I going to publish this? Cluster IPs is good enough. 6, this is the MySQL database port. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. So 6 against 60, guys, 6 against 60. It's almost unfair. Deploy application. And there we go. I'm deploying a MySQL database. Let me select the proper namespace.
Hey,
here
Adolfo,
we are.
I'm gonna pause you while you're running this. So one of the questions that just came up is, hey, what's the most sensible things to store secrets in, whether it's API keys, right? Should it be environment variables? Should there be arguments, right? And since you were just on the screen, what are some things that you think kind of as best practices to storing secrets?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely sensitive data. So if you have some sort of environment variable that you want to make sure that is kept in a secret, usually it's a password. It could be something like a specific config of a mount point that you want to make sure is protected. I mean, there's several concepts. The most important one is obviously a password. You want to make sure the passwords are stored in secrets, right? So that's the first thing I would go to if you think of a secret for a given deployment. I could change this slightly. You see, let's see if it's already running. It should be running soon. It's just finishing the deployment, selecting the node, and in terms of events, it's just pulling the image. But let's say I want to change this. That's a very good question. I'm going to add a secret to this. So I'm going to add a secret. I'll just create it from form again. and go ahead and say it's going to be on this namespace, MySQL pass, here's password, and I'm going to change it here to 1.4. Oh, sorry, let's see. Okay. Opaque, which is the default one, and I'll create the secret. So this application, I'm going to update this MySQL deployment and make sure, which is running, by the way. And I want to make sure I'm not using an environment variable anymore. I'm going to change this to the secret I've just created right here. See how easy this is. I'll put up the secret. It'll be a simple pass. And all I have to do is select this, and then I'm starting to use a secret. This is how easy it is to create a secret. Actually, I should have updated this properly. This should have been, let's change the secret here. Actually, this is supposed to be called MySQL password, which is the environment variable. Even though I'm doing things sort of randomly, it's important to show how easy it is to do this with Portainer, because I'm not writing one single line of code. I'm not rewriting a YAML file. I'm not running anything with kubectl. I'm doing everything with a UI in an opinionated manner, which is important because it helps me ensure that I'm doing things properly. Right? So now I'm going to change this back again to editing this application, deleting the environment variable, and just adding the secret. And there we go. I'll delete this here, and I'll add the secret. And the secret is MySQL pass. And this is the environment variable, as you see, MySQL with password, and click on update the application. Okay. This took me seconds. So this is the whole thing, the whole spirit behind this webinar, how to make the hard easy, right? Oh, but I want to see the YAML file. Can I see the YAML file? Yes, you can. It's here. There's no, we're just adding the intelligence to allow you to reduce the time that you need to deploy your applications in a way where you make sure that you're going to deploy it properly. You have everything in one single form. It's much easier to execute, and there you go. But if you want to change changes, you can do it and apply the changes if you need to. It is there for you if you need to. But it's just here. And there you go. It's replicated again. It captured the change, and now it's up and running. Oh, let's say I want to see the logs. It's in here. I don't need to go outside of the application to check my logs, do an SSH port into the node and check the logs. I can do this internally with Portainer, and I can even go ahead and log and access the console of this pod directly via Portainer. Go to bash, there we go, connect, and I can go to SQL root. It was webinar 1, 2, 3, 4, and there you go. I'm in the MySQL application directly from Portainer. So I have got full control of everything that is required from cradle to grave, from the minute this application is born to the minute I can get rid of it if I want to, if I need to, just by going here into applications and saying thank you very much. I don't need this database anymore. And Portainer is going to remove everything that is needed in this Kubernetes cluster. It's going to remove every remaining YAML definitions that have been created from that big YAML file to deploy this application. I see some questions.
Let me share one with you. So the question is a little similar to what we had earlier. Along the same lines, what is the difference between Docker Swarm and what you're doing now with Kubernetes? That person is very articulate, says that pretty much seems the same so far.
Really, auto-healing is something that you don't have with Docker Swarm as the way you do with Kubernetes.
Correct.
Believe me.
Yeah.
Auto-healing is like the thing with Kubernetes that makes your life so much easier. I mean, when I was working with Docker Swarm, I was always like, okay, if it crashes, there you go. I've got to wake up and make sure the application is up and running again. With Kubernetes, that is so unlikely because auto-healing is like one of the main things about Kubernetes.
So along, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? How does, and I think this goes kind of the next question, while you're showing Kubernetes inside of Portainer, how does Docker Swarm, you don't have to show it, but how would you consume Docker Swarm in a same fashion as Kubernetes within Portainer?
Oh, we have the exact same technology to do the same type of deployment. Oh, come on. Oh, you challenged me. I cannot not show this. So in this other instance where I have Docker Swarm, I can just do the same. You go to Docker Swarm, containers, and add a container. You see, it's got the same sort of intelligence behind it. Obviously, respecting what Docker Swarm needs to be able to deploy a container, but opinionated as much as it is in any situation with container. Okay.
Perfect.
I want to show. Sorry, Sean.
Yeah,
question?
one more question, because this is I think the fourth or fifth one. Is it possible to set up a kube cluster with Portainer?
I love this question. Yes, you can. So there are two methods. Actually, the first Kubernetes cluster here, the Helsinki one, was deployed using our bare metal wizard. For now, we support micro K8s, so we can set up bare metal with micro K8s. All you have to do is create the credential, an SSH credential, endpoint and add the IP addresses. Obviously, the user for that credential has to have sudo rights, the IP addresses, and Portainer is going to deploy that for you. The other option is via the deployment of what we call CAS, Kubernetes as a Service, and all these 6 cloud providers that we support, where we deploy the Kubernetes cluster for you and connect it to Portainer automatically, which was the case for these other 2 Kubernetes clusters that I have here, Civil and AWS. I deploy them, all three of them using our automatic provisioning technology.
Perfect.
Okay, another method I want to show, and now I'm going to jump to Canada. I'm going to go to Toronto, and I'm going to deploy a application using a custom template. Now, what's the difference between the regular, the first method in this one? That I here can define a manifest that I can customize to my requirements, to my needs, and enable other users to be able to have access to this template, right? So a bit of something interesting that I hope I have time to show, which is RBAC, right? So here, if I edit this template, I can enable or add this only to administrators, restricted to a set of teams and users that can have access to this template, which allows you to empower your users that have no idea what a Kubernetes cluster is or even a container is to deploy applications that they might need on their day-to-day, right? Like someone needs a Redis database. They have no idea how to deploy a Redis database. They don't want to know. They don't need to know. But you can actually give them this chance to, via a custom template, deploy this application. So again, let's go to the best practice, open and create a namespace here. I'm going to call this one webinar 01. Create the namespace. I hope I have time to also show a little bit about managing namespaces in Portainer. I'm going to select this custom template, select the namespace, give the name, it's 00, and look at this. All I have to do is click on deploy. That's it, right? I can define from a user perspective that everything's already sort of predefined, the namespace, the custom template, everything. All he has to do is click on deploy, and there you go. It's already up and running. And if he needs to delete it, he has control over the lifecycle management of this deployment, right? A typical case, which Sean will probably relate to very easily, marketing departments usually like to set up landing pages that have to be, this is something that has to be very fast, very dynamic. Sometimes they decide from one day to the next to deploy, to have a landing page running for a campaign. You can create a template which has, like a WordPress stack already there for you, or a YAML manifest. All you have to do is tell the marketing manager or the marketing executive, look, all you have to do is click here on deploy WordPress, click, go, and that's it. You want to kill it, it's as easy as selecting this application and clicking remove, and that's it. So this is another method of deploying applications with Portainer using custom templates. Okay, now let's go for the more advanced method of deploying applications with Portainer, which is very cool, one of my favorite features. And I'm going to open my Git repository here that I prepared for this webinar. And I'm going to deploy an S3 compliant or compatible server called Mini.io. Actually, I love this. It's an amazing S3 compatible, AWS S3 compatible server, which runs very nicely. And this particular Kubernetes cluster, I'm connected to it via via my VPN. I have a VPN here in the Tailscale. Where is my Tailscale? Oh, I actually have to open Tailscale. I think I killed my Tailscale. There you go. So let me log in, and I have this same machine here on my VPN written with Tailscale. Okay. So, but this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy this application using a manifest. So again, best practice, create a namespace. Two, get the namespace, and now I'm going to applications, manifest. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to first select the webinar namespace to end the name. It's going to call S30. Oh, sorry, S30, for example. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect Container to this Git repository. Here's the URL. It requires authentication, so I have to enable authentication here. And use container. API. There it is. Copy. Paste. I can save the credential for future use. And I'm going to select mini IO. And you know what? I'm going to select also automatic updates, which is our GitOps feature here. We'll change that. I leave it every 1 minute, or I can use webhooks to update this repository, or better said, this deployment plugin. So click on deploy, and there you go. Now, what is happening here is that the container is deploying this application from the Git repository. Let's see how this is going. Namespace. Let's already started the container. Let me check which node port is using node port as a publishing method. This is the port that the Kubernetes cluster is allowing me to use. And there you go. What's the username? Let's see. Minio webinar. Okay. The username mini IO. Webinar 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go. How easy was that? Now, the cool thing about this is that I can now only worry about my Git repository. I want to change anything. For example, the password here. I can flip it around, commit the change, get that webhook here. Come on, buddy. Copy. Open my terminal window. Perl. Close. And now I've just updated my deployment. Go to the mini.io application. And there you go. My password changed. So this is really cool. It's a more advanced way of deploying applications with container and Kubernetes. As you can see, it's got the GitOps philosophy behind it. So you can make your deployments in a much more, let's say, advanced manner, but using the ability to use versioning using just Git. Why would we reinvent the wheel? We just connect container to your Git repository, and this is any Git compliant technology behind it. And there you go. About your own part. Questions?
The good news is I think we've answered most of the questions. So one thing I do want to ask you, and we actually we just got a question. I'll let you answer. What does your persistent storage config look like?
Very good question. It really depends on what the cluster has enabled on the default storage technology. In this case, I'm using the MicroK host path, but I could have other ones. I could have OpenES, a Longhorn. I could have, in the case of a cloud-enabled cluster, I'm using, let's see, in this case of the civil storage technology, whatever the cluster has enabled by the cloud provider, civil value.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's the key, right? We're going to support any compliant storage backend, and I know my MicroK environment has I have a NAS behind it, but I also have local storage and all that good stuff. Can we use Terraform integrated or call APIs to provision it from Git Actions?
And there we go. Yes, you can. Here we are. Our API is hosted on Swagger Hub. Very complete. And yes, you can integrate it with Ansible or Terraform. And what's the other one? Lumi?
Halloumi.
Lumi. Yeah, Lumi.
Yeah.
There. You do whatever you want. And pretty much everything that you need or want to do with container is available via our API calls.
Yeah, I think that's one of the between GitOps, or you say DevOps, but between our GitOps solution, obviously the capability around the API, we definitely want to meet the needs of the most advanced use cases. And that's always a good thing. One quick question, we talked about Kubernetes clusters, right? While we only support micro-K8s from a bare metal perspective, right? We detail out just a little bit, if you don't mind, Adolfo, how we would consume existing Kubernetes clusters and the value and the benefit of doing so, and then obviously having Portainer manage them and support them.
Okay, so in order to add any Kubernetes cluster, we have an agent that you can enable on your Kubernetes cluster that you can deploy via the load balancer publishing process or node port, any of these two, and connect this to the container instance. There are several methods. Agent is for when you have control over something that's within your network. The edge agent is for something that is outside of your network, right? Outside of your range of management, of network management. But both act the same. You can manage any Kubernetes CNCF compliant Kubernetes cluster using any of these two options. And there you go. This is how we have actually these three Kubernetes clusters. None of them are running on my Portainer instance. They're outside of my Portainer instance, but I connect to them using the agent option.
Perfect. It's quick and easy enough. So I think with that, there's let's see, one more remaining question. A version deployment upgrade of a K8s app. Okay, can you show a version deployment upgrade of a K8s app? And if you do not have this in the environment, Adolfo, I wouldn't push it too far. So just be careful.
But it's not that hard. Let's go to civil. Did I delete the Ubuntu? Yes, I did. But anyway, if you're using the GitOps option, all you have to do is change the version of your application here. And Portainer is going to capture that difference from your Git repository and deploy it on top. The other option is just to go into the application when you're running an application. Where did I leave? Let's see. I think it's the Toronto one for Redis. Yes, I think I did. Well, anyway, you can just go from the form when you're editing the application. All you have to do is just change the tag of that container, and Portainer is going to capture that difference and do that for you. The last option is if you want to redeploy the application, all you have to do is when you have an application, once defined, there's an option, just click on redeploy, and you can do it from there.
Perfect. Look, I mean, we could clearly keep going and showing lots of more things, but really for today's webinar, I think we definitely highlighted that. Highlighted the key points. So I'm going to go ahead and take back over screen sharing and close this out. Feel free to jump in the Q&A if you want to ask questions while I am bringing up my screen. There we go. And look, one of the things that we wanted to do throughout this webinar, and we're going to continue these, by the way, is really solve problems or help you overcome challenges in the easiest way possible. Sometimes it'll be using Portainer technology. Sometimes it'll be a combination of Portainer and something else, and it may be a combination of non-Portainer related technologies, and that's absolutely fine. And so we hope, interact with us in social media and our community. We would love to hear from all of you and maybe understand what you're looking for, what you need. A question just came in. How do I apply granular permission policies and create my own roles and permissions? I know, Adolfo, you're typing that answer, but go ahead and tell us.
Okay, so from a Portainer perspective, there's two ways of ensuring permission policy for application deployments. We support OPA. So we have it in our application, maybe well, and the other thing that we have is RBAC. We have a very powerful RBAC engine that can not only run standalone in Portainer, but you can also integrate this with other authentication engines like LDAP, Microsoft AD, and Open Authentication.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's one of the things, right? The idea of role-based access and Kubernetes, or just in containers in general, is not the easiest thing, or it's not the easiest conversation to have, and probably not the easiest to implement. And so what we wanted to do within Portainer is just make it simple. And so we allow you to, as Adolfo said, consume existing OAuth, capabilities, and then we provide what I love is with an open policy agent, OPA. Allow you to put policy around pretty much anything and everything you want. Obviously, we have out of the box stuff as well. And so, a lot of detail, a lot of work has gone into it, right? What's interesting is I actually had a conversation with one of our community members, and he was working on a Portainer video. He was working on, hey, I need to create something and highlight something. He's like, but it's almost like too easy. How do I show this stuff? And so hopefully that resonates with you as what Adolfo showed today, right? It took 60 different steps down to 6. Right, that's the goal. That's our approach. And hopefully, if you're not consuming or utilizing Portainer today, either in a business environment or at home or in some sort of lab scenario, don't forget to check it out and give it a try. We do offer things like free trials. We have our 5 nodes free program, and we really are, if you're looking for just pure open source, obviously there's a community edition, and everything that was shown today came from the business edition. And we really are excited what is going on, not only in the community, obviously from us as well. And just because everybody's been asking, hey, is this going to be made available post-event? Absolutely, we're going to make these available, and we will continue to do these. Our goal is to get in front of you, and maybe if you want to interact with us, not only in the community or in Slack, or in our community Slack, but maybe even on social media, reach out to us. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Leandro. I did forget one question, but don't forget, you can actually jump out there and, we would love to interact, and maybe we'll have a webinar talking about one of your topics. So let me answer, actually, I'll let you answer this, Adolfo, because then there's a few more. Can you give a little bit of an idea about backup and restore of Portainer, of applications, of Kubernetes clusters, et cetera, all within the paradigm of Portainer?
Okay, so for the Portainer instance, we do have a backup and restore option. When it comes to applications, then we would suggest you use the tool that best fits your needs. There are tons of tools there, like Beam, Valero. They have their capabilities to deploy backup and restore strategies on Kubernetes clusters. But for Portainer per se, yes, we do have a backup and restore capability. Recording.
Yep. And obviously we have plenty of customers doing this for a variety of reasons, which is super important and super valid. The recording will be made available. We'll send it out via email, as well as it'll be on our YouTube channel for those that wanted to know. And for Alan, the question is, by 5 nodes free, you mean 5 nodes per Kubernetes cluster? Let me be very, very clear on this. We offer 5 nodes free for a single instance. 5 nodes free for a single instance. That could be Kubernetes cluster, that could be Docker Swarm underneath, that could be Docker. At the end of the day, you just get 5 nodes. And then the more important thing is you are only supposed to use one 5 nodes free license at a time. And yeah, we want you to be able to utilize the business edition features as well. And if you're in a home and student situation, we have our home and student edition that is actually very it's utilized heavily, and I was surprised when I joined Portainer to learn that. But for me personally, I use a little bit of it, and then we also have a couple other ways to interact with us if you're looking for a free trial, or if you're looking for a more of like a managed proof of concept type of scenario. And that probably, depends on your business needs. Enough of the business talk. We appreciate everybody joining today. We wanted to stick to focusing on technology. Hopefully we've done that. And for the most part, I think we did. If you have any questions, hit us up on social media, on LinkedIn, Twitter, find us in our Slack community. But that is the first edition of Making the Hard Easy. Today it was focused on Kubernetes adoption. And we just want to say, Adelpho, thank you for jumping in. Thank you for giving the demo and being a little flexible.
No, please, by all means. Thank you very much, everybody that joined. Those amazing questions. Hope to see you guys soon, be that in our channels, direct contact, emails, however it is in our next webinar stuff. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. Making the Hard Easy. Appreciate you all. And look for us. And we'll be on Reddit as well. And hope you have a great rest of your day. And see you next time. Cheers.